welcome everybody. Thanks very much for registering for the webinar. My name's Sheila Begbie. I'm the Director of Rugby Development at Scottish Rugby. We're going to take you through our roadmap that we launched earlier this morning. So the webinar format will be that there's a 30-minute presentation. Questions can be submitted. If you go to the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A function, so you can submit your questions there. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can live. And if we don't get around to answering lots of questions, then we'll do a Q&A document which we'll share with everybody after the webinar. And the webinar will be posted online tonight as well, so you'll be able to see the recording or share it or point people in your club to the link for the webinar as well. So just in terms of the agenda for today, I'll do a bit of an overview of the roadmap and talk about season 2021. And then my two colleagues will look at the return to rugby stages within the roadmap in a bit more detail for you. So Neil Graham's our Head of Training and Education, and Jen Griffin is our Regional Director down in Glasgow South. So in terms of an overview of our roadmap, it outlines how rugby could return in Scotland. It's got 6 return to rugby stages, which are all aligned to the Scottish Government route map. Return to train are stages 1 to 4, and stages 5 to 6 look at return to play. Within the roadmap, we highlight the likely triggers to transition between the various stages in the roadmap. It sets out some indicative dates for each stage as well. And as I said earlier on, if we can just remind you that it really is the Scottish Government's route map that will determine what our transition is through our own roadmap. Some caveats here. Obviously the welfare of our friends, family, teammates, and in general the rugby community are really important, and it's also really important for us collectively to make sure that we're protecting the NHS. That needs to be a priority for all of us. We'll only transition through each of the stages when it's safe to do so, and again that will be in line with Scottish Government guidance. Updates on each stage will be issued by Scottish Rugby, and again we'll be looking at Scottish Government guidance and also the route map, and that is subject to change at any time. We do, as a sport, have some challenges ahead of us. So rugby poses a greater threat to virus transmission than most other sports, and that's due to the prolonged periods of close personal contact within rugby. Individuals may be anxious about returning to rugby immediately, so maybe you're aware already of some players or coaches, volunteers, referees within your clubs that people are maybe a little bit fearful and might be a bit fearful and anxious of coming back. And I'm sure that on a local level that you'll be dealing with that within your club. In terms of travel restrictions, they might have a significant impact on regional and national competitions. And there could be an increased cost as well, that if there's still some social distancing happening when we come back into the game, then in terms of hiring, the number of buses that you might need to go to away fixtures might increase. So instead of your 1 bus, it might be 2 or potentially 3 buses that you might need, depending on what the distance is, which will increase costs for clubs. There is a potential, and I'm sure you've read, as we all have, about the risk of a second wave in the winter. So that is a big threat to what we're going to do around the competitions. And there might be local lockdowns as well. We've already seen what's happened down in Dumfries and Galloway and what's happened in the northeast of Scotland, and that would impact on any competitions that we're going to run. And then a player who tests positive after a game will likely lead to both teams needing to self-isolate for 14 days. So that will be a major impact on our competitions as we go forward. In terms of the 2021 competitive season, we announced this morning, in line with the roadmap, that the start to competitive rugby season will be delayed until October at the earliest, and competitive rugby will only begin once we get to stage 6 of our roadmap, and stage 6 has been activated. Then competitive rugby will start. In terms of the impact, we're going to be looking at modified competitive programmes at all levels of the game, including leagues, cups and competitions. And the next steps are that we'll do a consultation with all of our clubs, schools, looking at the women's game as well, and competitive season dates will be issued in due time to clubs and schools. So in terms of taking through the roadmap, Neil and Jen are going to take you through and give you some more information on the specifics and the details of the roadmap that we launched today. Neil?
Thank you, Sheila. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so we're just going to look at the actual roadmap itself now. All the information is on the Scottish Rugby website. There's a specific hub now for all this information, and there's some supplementary documentation that goes with this roadmap that you can also download, as well as all previous stage and phase updates that we've provided, and that will be the site where go-to site for any further information. We are currently in stage 2, and that was announced last Friday, and we are currently working on plans for our stage 3 guidance. As you'll see through this snapshot of the roadmap, we've aligned our stages to the Scottish Government route map. In phase 4 particularly, we have 3 sub stages of the government's route map, stage 4, 5 and 6, and that's to ensure that we take a cautious approach to the return of full competitive rugby. So we won't go from a non-contact situation straight into competitive full fixtures. There will be a staged approach going from small group, non-contact training, maybe a bit of touch rugby in there as well, through to modified activities. Then in stage 5, that will be the point in which friendly fixtures, internal matches could be triggered and allowed, and then leading to a full competitive playing offer coming in stage 6. And as Sheila indicated before, the earliest point in time where we envisage stage 6 being activated is in October, with further information to follow on that. We split the roadmap into 2 chunks, and we've got return to training and return to play. And Jen and I are just going to go through some further information on that now. So from a contact level perspective, I think it's really important to clarify at this point that when in rugby terms, if we talk about non-contact, we often talk about touch rugby. And full contact is full scrums, full rucks, mauls, etc. And from a government perspective, that language of contact and full contact actually means something different. So that's something just to be aware of in here. So when we say non-contact training, actually that's in a rugby sense. And in stage 3, as you look at upon here, we may be moving into a situation in stage 3 where some form of touch rugby, all modified small-sided touch rugby games may be allowed, and more information on that will follow, particularly around about the children and youth contact sport announcement last week from the First Minister, which was announced that from the 13th of July, some form of contact sport can resume. We are going to provide further guidance on that next week, and that will be in line with further phase 3 guidance as well. From a phase 4 perspective, when we trigger phase 4, again, that will be in line with Scottish Government guidance. We will move into a modified contact phase, and that will allow some tackling practice, some modified scrum lineup, rucks, maul, etc. And there'll be some constraints over that activity for the first initial period before we move into a full contact area. And that's again to mitigate and be cautious through that phase because of the increased risks associated with that prolonged face-to-face contact that we have in rugby. From a group size perspective, it naturally moves through from an individual training phase that we're in now through to small group, large group, and then full squad. From a competitive angle, obviously no competitions at the moment and no fixtures permitted, and it won't be until stage 5 until there are any activities from a competitive point of view allowed in a friendly form, and certainly not until stage 6 from a competitive angle, leagues, cups, etc. I'm just going to hand over to Jen now just to talk through some of the facility side of things.
Thanks, Neil. So when we look at phase one, all facilities remained closed. Phase two, as you'll be aware, on Monday this week, pitches were allowed to open, and that was subject to clubs owning or managing their own facilities. Where there's been local authority management or ownership of the facility, that is a bit different, and the club would have to consult and follow the local authority guidelines on that. As you'll all be aware as well, as of Monday, outdoor catering and hospitality is allowed to go ahead. I'm already aware that some clubs are keen to utilise that. We have put some extra resource on the website today, and I'll talk you through that later on. As we move into phase four, gyms could open. We are still kind of waiting to see what that looks like. There's information and kind of more consideration coming from government on that. So they could open, and the hope is by stage 5 and 6, we have all indoor and outdoor facilities able to open. So just looking at what we already know, as I said, as Monday this week, pitches were allowed to be open subject to local authority ownership, and outdoor catering is good to go as of the 6th of July. For now, just want to reiterate that indoor facilities should remain closed to the public, with the exception of toilets can be used, and there's quite significant guidance being provided on the Scottish Government website on what should be put in place. So talking about a higher frequency and intensity of cleaning, and just being able to manage that physical distance in and out of small areas of high traffic, which toilets could potentially be if you do have people using the pitch. So appreciate that there's a lot going on, and we've pulled together some resources and support for you and your clubs to utilise. They are all available on the Scottish Rugby website as of today. We have spoken about risk assessments. So as you will all already do, you'll have risk assessments for anything that goes on in and around your facility. We're talking about an additional risk assessment which will minimise the risk of transmission of the virus. We do have a risk assessment template on the website, as you can see, and we've also given a bit of an example. It doesn't include everything, all facilities are different, but we've just tried to give you a wee bit of an example of what that could look like and some of the things that would be contained within it, and that's for pitches. What our recommendation is that someone carries that risk assessment out and it is signed off by a member of the club committee and also the COVID-19 safety coordinator. Everyone who is volunteering or staff within the club should have sight of that, and we would recommend that they sign to say they've seen it. Things like this will always need regular update, not just in line with government guidance, with changes in your club as more people can come in, as you get used to what is the new normal. So we would recommend that these are regularly looked at and reviewed, and any updates that are on it should be shared with all those that need to see it and who's appropriate to do that. We also have some risk assessment guidance. It's really clear, simple instructions and just thought out of things to consider. Now, please remember, this is just about minimising the risk, and we won't all get everything right on the first go. That's why it's really important to review what is in there. On the outdoor catering hospitality guidance, which comes into play as of Monday, again, we would recommend that there is an additional COVID-19 risk assessment. We do have an example, again, on the website. It doesn't include everything, but it gives you that flavour of what it may have. We've got additional recommendations and guidance for outdoor catering and hospitality, and that just includes things to consider, such as compliance, so speaking to licensing board, local authority, checking your club insurance, all of those things that you would naturally go through anyway, but it's just to highlight. We also have given some recommendations of operation, and you can dip in and dip out of them as you wish. As I said, this is just recommendation and guidance. We've been really fortunate that tenants have supported us through this process, and they've given us some opening guidance for outdoor hospitality. They are the experts in the field at this, so they have provided some really good, clear and concise guidance. They also have a reopening process. As I'm sure you'll all be aware, it's just not quite as simple as, you know, shutters come up and we switch the lights on and go. There is that tailored process into preparing for a bar or catering venue to function. So all of that's been really clearly laid out by tenants as well. And finally, as part of one of our recommendations was to get an app for things like booking tables, table service, just so that you're able to manage what those maximum numbers could be for your venue. So we have the local app, and the information again is on the website on how clubs could potentially utilise that. Just want to be really clear just one more time, this is advice and guidance and recommendations. Please do seek further guidance from your local authority, your licensing boards and your insurers before you go ahead and open the organisation.
Great, thanks Jen. So as we move through the Scottish Rugby return to rugby stages, in the roadmap document, you'll find some further information about what this could look like at each stage, what the likely triggers are at those stages, and some supporting guidance there for what might club schools need to have in place to move into that stage. So I'm just going to take you through just a short snippet of information about what each stage could look like in a little bit more detail. So starting with stage 3, this is the stage that we will hopefully be moving into at the back end of next week, if not the following week. That'll be determined by the government's announcement on the 9th of July. So small group non-contact training will potentially allow us to move into potentially some more traditional activities. Small group is quite vague at the moment, and I know there's a few questions coming in around about what does small group mean. We can't confirm what that number will be just at the moment. We will do in our guidance when we have that detail. We hope it will be a greater number of people than is at the moment, which is currently 8. And no more than 8 players from a maximum of 3 households. We hope it will be more than that, and it may allow for more players to take part in activities on one pitch. So that's hopefully where we'll move to there. Obviously, during this period, as I said earlier, there is a separate discussion ongoing and further guidance to follow on children and young people's contact, and we will send out further information on that next week. So to allow stage 3 to happen and to trigger, equipment sharing will be permitted. So naturally, to play any sort of games, you're going to be passing a ball. So there will be some guidance around measures around equipment sharing. So sanitizing the balls and equipment before and after training is going to be crucial to avoid that transmission and cut the risks down. From a club school perspective, and what you may have to have in place, the COVID-19 Safety Coordinator role has already been launched, and we had well over 150 people log into the training last night. So thank you very much for those who did attend. Clubs, we're looking to support you with that role, and have started that process last night. Schools can also opt into this process and be part of that training. That is absolutely up to them, and we're pleased to welcome schools on board to that process, and it will form part of the minimum operating standards for next season. So moving into stage 4, group sizes will increase at that stage, and we are hopeful that modified contact rugby activities would be permitted as previously described. So some form of one-on-one tackle, for example, may be permitted at this stage. So we may be able to move into some form of modified contact rugby activities, a bit more akin to what we're used to. Likely triggers. We will only move into this situation in guidance with the government, and that will come in the form of that close contact exposure being deemed low enough to allow contact activity to take place. We're not at that stage at the moment, and certainly stage 3 will need to go smoothly and without any spikes in cases taking place for us to move to stage 4. What might have to happen in a club environment or school environment? Well, certainly if gyms are opening, then there's quite a lot of risk assessment work needs to be done around that, potentially PPE for staff. Timetables to avoid peak times and facilities. So trying to schedule in the use of a facility will be crucial to avoid real peak times of use, which again could lead to risks of increased transmission. Key point at this stage is that coaches, volunteers, players will have access to a Scottish Rugby COVID-19 online course, and that course is being produced at the moment in conjunction with World Rugby, and we hope to have that live soon, and that will be an information course for anyone in the game, but certainly it will be compulsory for our coaches, match officials, etc., when we get back into our game. From a stage 5 perspective, this is when we will hopefully see local friendly matches being permitted. To get to that stage, the trigger for this will be that contact exposure will be low enough to allow unrestricted activities. And again, match day assessments, because friendly activities would be, friendly games will be permitted. There'll be some match day management guidelines produced from us and sent to clubs, and associated risk assessments. At that stage, we've obviously got player welfare considerations about players playing up and down, just like we would do in a normal season, and therefore we will be issuing guidance for clubs and schools on that particular matter at that time. And then stage 6 is really the end point of our roadmap. And the triggers to move to that are that really the virus is no longer an issue in our society, and that it is in control. So there's a lot of relaxation of the current restrictions we have in place. And really from a club perspective, it's the updating of risk assessments that's going to be key there, just like in any normal season when risk assessments would be done for a match. Spectators, etc., may be allowed at this point as well. So again, looking at how, as usual, there would be risk assessments done for that side of the game. So that information there is all available online. It's all available through the roadmap. And again, the caveat at the bottom is we will only move through each stage when it is safe to do so, and in line with Scottish Government route map guidance, which we're receiving updates on a daily basis, and we will look to communicate all of our stages with infographics, summary documents, and then a webinar like you're seeing today, which will all be stored online, so you can forward that on to your people in your club, parents, etc., who want the information. I'm just going to hand back over to Sheila at this stage. Sheila, just to wrap up and give a timeline. Sheila, just on mute, I think. Yeah.
Okay, right, there we go. Okay, so just in terms of timeline, so today, as you're aware, we've launched the roadmap. The outdoor catering announcement has been made today, and we've obviously been on the webinar together as well. In terms of Thursday the 9th, so next week will be the announcement of the Scottish Government's phase 3. So you're aware that every 3 weeks that they keep reviewing where they are in terms of the route map. So some announcements next week on phase 3 on Thursday. Then on Friday, we will, Scottish Rugby phase 3 guidance will be announced, and we'll have a webinar also. And we will be looking to share some information with clubs and schools around children and young people's contact rugby guidance. We have a document that we have shared with Scottish Government, so we've asked for some feedback on kind of what our thoughts are about how that could look. And then on Thursday the 30th of July, Scottish Government will announce their phase 4 announcements as well. So these are some key dates coming up in July for all of us in terms of any movement through the stages. So Neil, I think that we've maybe got a little bit of time. That could we maybe pick up 2 or 3 questions in terms of just doing a live response back to people?
Yes, certainly, Sheila. Yeah, just to look through them here. I think Jen, there's one here. I think we've certainly got answers to, which is around about some of the resources available for clubs when they do get up and running regarding posters and that type of, I suppose, material collateral for the facilities, and just asking whether we will be able to supply some of that or offer some downloads, etc. So I wonder if you could.
Yeah, we're working just now on pulling together some generic posters for clubs that you will be able to use, and hopefully maybe even change and put your own club logo on it. So we're absolutely looking at that just now. We've got some really good guidance from the staff who are in BT Murrayfield just now. So we'll absolutely get those out on the website available to download.
Thanks, Jen. There's a couple of questions here about coaching courses and refereeing courses, and will there be a delay in those? So I can answer that one with my other hat on, which is yes, we are looking at alternative options for delivering qualifications once the season is up and running. As you'll be aware, we ceased to run any face-to-face courses, obviously in line with government guidelines. So we're currently looking at online solutions for coaches and referees and first aid as well, courses to take place over the coming months, certainly in line with this season starting. So that is something that's en route. Just asked a couple of questions about PVG. Will PVG be changing in any shape or form, and the requirements? And it's an absolute answer to that is no. PVG scheme and the requirement for all youth coaches to have a PVG is still absolutely the case. And you know, there's a process in place now that you can start to actually process those applications. And now our lead child protection officer, Karen Burnett, is actually back in next week, so we will actually be starting to process those now.
Neil, there's a couple of people asking around where are the risk assessments and the resources on the website. If you just go on the website and click on the Return to Rugby guidelines for school and clubs, if you scroll down, they're all there and you're able to download them all.
Neil, there's a question around the Scottish Rugby COVID-19 course. Does that differ from World Rugby? And if people have already done the World Rugby course, does that still stand?
Brilliant. Yeah, so the World Rugby course has we've actually got permission from World Rugby to adapt that course and just add in our own Scottish Rugby roadmap, etc., and some specific Scottish government details. Absolutely, when we launch that course, we would advise everyone to undertake the new one. It won't be a huge onerous course. Our colleague James Wade is actually developing that at the moment, and it will likely be 20 minutes, 15-20 minutes to complete. But if players have already completed the World Rugby one, then that will certainly suffice. But we will our current course will be launched in line with stage 4.
There's a question about scenario planning in terms of leagues. So just to make people aware that we've asked council members to meet with their constituent clubs, with the championship committee rep as well, so that we want clubs to have input to the process of what the leagues or what competitions could look like if we're able to start again in October. So just to say that, yeah, we will be absolutely getting some feedback. We will be scenario planning and looking at getting some feedback from clubs, so that by the end of July, hopefully we should have an idea of potentially what the competitions could look like.
Great, Sheila. There's one here as well around about the announcement yesterday that young people of 11 years old and younger can now play outdoors without physical distancing, and what impact that has on our guidelines. So I go back to probably our discussion earlier on around about phase 3 guidance next week. We will embed any information within that aspect of the announcement yesterday into our phase 3 guidance, and that will come out next week. We currently don't have any further information on group sizes and what the upper age bracket is of young people. So when the government mentioned young people, that's still being clarified, but we will circulate information on that particular topic next week. And I think probably at the moment that's
But listen, I mean, what we'd say is the video of this webinar will be online tonight by, we reckon, sort of by 6 o'clock tonight. So if you want to share the link with people in your club, then we'd be happy for you to do it. We've got a whole host of questions here. So what we'll do is we'll group all the questions together and we will come back to you. So all the questions that have been asked, we promise we'll come back to you with a response within a couple of days, and then we will share all of the questions so that you can all see what other people have been asking, because there are, as Neil has intimated and Jen also, there's some common themes within the questions that you're asking. And what I would say is, listen, we absolutely appreciate the fact that most of you are volunteers, that you've got other commitments apart from working in the club. You've got your own work, you've got your families, etc. So we will try and take quite a lot of the strain for you. We'll try to interpret what comes out from Scottish Government and make it appropriate for the game. So I would say to you also, if at any point you've got any questions out with the webinars that you want to ask, then, you know, please, we'd rather that you asked us than do something if you were unsure in terms of, you know, what you should be doing or what you should not be doing. So you know where to get hold of us in terms of BT Murrayfield. So I think at this point, as I say, we've got around 60 questions or so from all of you. So we really appreciate the fact that you're asking questions. Thanks to Jen and to Neil for their contribution today. And again, thank you so much to yourselves for coming on the call. We look forward to working with you and we look forward to supporting you. Okay.